What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at Manchester City versus Liverpool in the English Premier League. And before we start, check out both my books. They're online, they're on Amazon, and there's links in the description below. Also, be sure to check out Keyframe. It's how I made this video. There's a link for that also in the description. So let's get right into it. Manchester City built with a back four. So their two central defenders would be split by Ederson in their first phase of build-up. Rodri was their holding midfielder, who would then be joined by Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne at times, and this was the main source of their progression. Liverpool changed slightly how they've been pressing this year, and more of a diagonal pressing in the wide areas, shifting mechanism when they press, and what this did, it would allow Rodri to become the free player in many instances in their build-up in the first phase of progression and in the midfield third, because when the front three from Liverpool would be attracted to the first line, Rodri would be the player who would be left free. Now we see Manchester City here playing with a double pivot of Kevin De Bruyne and Rodri, creating tighter connections from their first line of build-up into their two holding midfielders. So what this did for Liverpool, it was narrowed their front three, allowing for more space to be created into the wide areas, into their fullbacks for progression around the defensive block of Liverpool. So these two holding midfielders positioning themselves between the front line would narrow these players horizontally and attract midfielders further forward to potentially jump, creating more space for the Manchester City players. Manchester City also looked to build with asymmetry in their first line between Kyle Walker and Cancelo. Cancelo played more free and his ability to get forward, while Walker, especially early on in the game, played more narrow and deeper, creating off-center back three, which we can slightly see here. And then in the midfield, we often saw Manchester City overload the left half space with a diamond midfield structure, creating two players, Bernardo Silva and Jack Grealish, playing between the lines in the half space in this left side of their build-up against this different Liverpool shifting defensive style. So as we see, the front three are highlighted, and the two wingers for Liverpool are very much oriented towards the fullback of Manchester City. Now what this would cause is it would force the midfielders of Liverpool to cover the space between the front three of Liverpool horizontally, which would then force Jordan Henderson at times to jump further forward, and would often create space between the lines in higher positions for the Manchester City players. We see the Manchester City asymmetry and build-up, Kyle Walker positioning himself more narrow and deeper than Cancelo, protecting against transition and building in different concepts on each side of the field. And we see how Rodri would become free, and this was due to the diagonal pressing of Liverpool and their front three attracted to the first line of build-up for Manchester City, trying to look to press them into wider areas, making it easy for Liverpool to isolate their possession and win the ball back higher up the field. But now Rodri is the free player because of the pinning from Kevin De Bruyne against Jordan Henderson and Bernardo Silva against Curtis Jones, which would then make Rodri free and able for Manchester City to break the press. Now we see the Liverpool 4-5-1 with their wide wingers orienting towards the fullbacks of Manchester City, and this causes them varying their heights in their defensive phase. And now we can look at the Manchester City midfield structure and their occupation in more advanced positions. We have Bernardo Silva and Jack Grealish creating overload in the left half space, as well as Foden and De Bruyne playing between the lines. And this overload in the left-hand side would play to their overload and isolate concept, which we've seen them use in the past. And by overloading this left half space, it creates a more narrow defensive structure and allows for the players pinning the back four with narrow runs to then create the free player on the weak side through Gabriel Jesus. So when the ball was circulated or played through a long diagonal, progression could occur for the Manchester City side because of this overload and isolate concept. Now in the second half, we start to see Liverpool pressing like they used to do in the past few seasons, with Diogo Jota positioning himself on the holding midfielder, preventing him from being their free player in the build-up, and allowing the wingers to then block access to the fullback and pressing out to in. But what this would happen was take away the access to the holding midfielder of Rodri, but then it would create more potential to progress through the wide areas. and with the diamond midfield shape and 3 players occupying the space between the lines for Manchester City, it would narrow the Liverpool defensive block and allow players in the wide area for Manchester City, in this situation using dual width, to have more flexible movement and manipulate the space in the wide areas to exploit the space and progress around the Liverpool defensive block. Liverpool built up in their usual 4-3-3, with Fabinho as their holding midfielder. Playing in front of them was Curtis Jones and Jordan Henderson. Manchester City started in a 4-3-3 and then shifted to a 4-5-1 and a 4-4-2 in deeper areas, and they pressed from out to in using their narrow wingers and looking to have Kevin De Bruyne block access to the holding midfielder of Liverpool to then try and win the ball higher up the field or force them to play more direct. Here we see a situation with the 3/4 press of Manchester City in their 4-4-2 against the Liverpool's 4-3-3 in build-up. And Liverpool's biggest change and their source of many of their chances created was through the inverting of James Milner higher up the field. James Milner filling in as the fullback in this situation. But now we can see the deep fullbacks of Liverpool and their single holding midfielder of Fabinho looking to attract pressure from the Manchester City team and their defensive organization for them to then try and create a free player between the lines of Diogo Jota through Mane and Salah's inverting, or look to play direct and in the space left by Manchester City's defensive block. Now we see Matip progressing on the ball via dribbling, looking to narrow the midfielders in Manchester City's 4-5-1, and also the player narrowing these 5 players in the midfield for Manchester City was the inverting James Milner. So this allowed Salah to position himself wider and try and create isolated situations where he would be able to drive in the offensive third and take players one-on-one in dangerous situations. And in this example, we see it very clearly against Manchester City's 4-5-1. We see James Milner inverting, and now the player left free is Mohamed Salah. At the base of this build-up was Fabinho and Jordan Henderson, looking to provide the service for Salah, the free player, entering the final third. And with the inverting of James Milner, this also left a lot of space between Mo Salah and the first line of build-up, which we often saw a player like Jordan Henderson fan out into the wide area to provide a deep playmaking role in situations like this where Mo Salah would not be able to get the ball. But in this situation, Mo Salah is free and can easily receive a pass from Fabinho and attack the final third of Manchester City. And that's going to wrap up today's analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.